we're here stuck at home, and I've been looking for ways to engage the membership base a little bit more. And one of the questions that keeps coming up is nutrition. And I know from previous experience following you that I resonate with a lot of the messages that you share with people, and the way that you look at nutrition and the experiences that you've been through too. And I've always felt like nutrition was one of those things that was individual for everybody. And I feel like when you speak about nutrition, it comes from the same place and experience that I have, but it's just way more knowledgeable and way more dialed in, you know? And that's why I wanted to bring you on today. I don't know if other people have followed you as much as I have, but maybe you could give us a quick background story. I know your background is pretty deep, but maybe just a quick vision of, you know, what brought you to nutrition and what got you to start IN Nutrition in the first place.
Yeah, man. First of all, I appreciate just having me on. Always, like, you know, I respect everything that you guys are doing. And but in terms of my journey in nutrition, man, I'll make a really long story short. You know, when I was 18, I was an athlete, and I use that term very loosely. I played golf, and I got injured before I was supposed to play in college, and I found myself in like the rehab setting, and I had never lifted a weight in my life. Like, I always thought they were way too heavy, and decided, you know, I should I need to do this rehab so I could play golf again. And I kind of fell in love with being in the gym setting. And at the same time, I was 18. Like, I wanted to do things that 18-year-old guys do. And I also got approached for like some modeling things. And it was, you know, it was just like every other male teenager, like pursuit for abs, right? Like that was my target. And so, what's that?
Teenager.
Yeah, bro. Well, yeah, every male in general, right? Like, but that's when it starts, right? That's when it starts. So, but that was the goal. And so, you know, I did all the crunches. I did, you know, some cardio. And it wasn't until somebody was like, man, like read the magazines, like read the nutrition stuff, because it's all nutrition. Like it's what you eat. And so I read all of the articles, and all I read was like, don't eat this, don't eat this, don't eat this. And I never read like what I was supposed to eat. And so before I knew it, like I was full blown like anorexic. Like I was 118 pounds, bro. 5'9", 118. It was pretty bad. It was pretty skinny. And so that was a pretty transformative time in my life, because, you know, when you're there, like there's a lot of negative effects. Like there's hormonal issues, there's, you know, which cascades into God knows what else. And you know, fortunately for me, I was able to overcome it. And when I overcame it, I knew the power they had brought back into my life. And I also recognized that a lot of people were struggling with the same things I had struggled with. And so it was that moment when I was like, man, I'm going to pay this forward no matter what. And so I changed my major in college. I went to school at Florida State. I got my degree. You know, like while I was there, dude, like I would help all the frat boys. I would help all the, you know, like the girl that worked next door, that lived next door, like she was a culinary major. Like, so she would cook my food. I would do her nutrition plan. Like anybody that would listen, anybody that would geek out with me at all, like I would do it. And, you know, fortunately for me, like I was able to turn my passion into a career. You know, I built, to my knowledge, one of the biggest one-on-one nutrition consulting companies in the world. I think we were the first to do multiple seven figures. I know others have crossed that since, but you know, we were one of the first. And not without failing. I definitely had a lot of failures along the way, but it was a story with a happy ending. Yeah, right. Learning experiences for sure. So, but that's what brings us to today, man. Like, I mean, you know, my model is very non-traditional. As you know, in the CrossFit space, I came in and people hated me long before they loved me. And it's because I brought a very radical idea. And, you know, I came in circa 2012, 2013, and I was one of the first people to, you know, publicly speak out against paleo for CrossFitters. And it wasn't speaking out against the paleo diet in general, but paleo relative to application in CrossFit. And it was actually that moment that kind of changed how I viewed everything. I said, man, like people don't have nutrition wrong, they have nutritional application wrong. And ever since then, it's been a mission of mine to change how the world views nutritional application. And I think that's what brings me to calls like this, because they look at how I do things, and the application is usually what's a little bit different. But I'm usually able to articulate it at a relatively simple level, so you understand why we're applying, why we're doing it, and hopefully, people enjoy that. So I've been very blessed to speak on some cool stages, man. Like, I've spoken at Google, Salesforce had me booked this year. I've spoken on some big like Fitness Business Summit, had me come in. So yeah, man. Now I want to help anybody.
I think it was Google that I saw where you were on stage and you were just like, all right, give me something that you think you know about, and I'm gonna write it down, and then I'm gonna talk about it.
Yeah.
You took a bunch of subjects, and that was a great way to do it, because then you were able to knock out so many different things. And
that's how I do all my seminars. I believe that I have a fundamental belief people don't go to seminars to listen, like, even though that's in theory why you do a seminar, right? But like, let's be honest, nutritional lectures are the most boring things in the world. But every person goes there with a fundamental belief of or a hope that hey, I hope whoever's speaking answers this question. And so I always say, whatever questions you brought here, let's make sure that I answer them. Let's not leave it to chance. And of course, there's some fundamental things that I discuss, but normally if we can get 30, 40, 50 topics on the board, it makes for an amazing lecture. And that's why, speaking wise, I've been asked to speak so many times, because it's always engaging. People always get what they need out of it. So
yeah, for sure. And, a lot of people talk about their mission, and they talk about how they want to help people. But I think you're one of those authentic people, because from my own experience, I saw you at one of the UFCs, and right away, without any kind of hesitation, you were ready to help me out and help Biggie out. And, that goes a long way, because a lot of people don't realize how difficult it is to develop a good team when it comes to mixed martial arts, because there's so many different facets to it, and I know what I'm talking about when it comes to strength and conditioning, but just to see you there, and for you to be so forthcoming and helpful with the process of getting Biggie to where he needs to be, really shows how authentic you are, and how you always talk about impact over everything. And you've definitely made an impact in my life, and you've definitely made an impact for Biggie. So, I really appreciate you doing that. And I really appreciate you coming on here today and answering these questions with us, because I know that you're a busy guy, and I know that, you could be charging for stuff like this. So I really appreciate you, just helping the community out.
It's always an honor, man. It's a privilege. I tell everybody, when I was 18, 19, I wish that social media had the presence it did today. I wish these resources were available, and I wish more of the people that I had looked up to back then as nutritional gurus or mentors or whatever, I wish they were more willing to connect, willing to, put their information out to the world. And so I always said, if I'm going to have the change that I want to have in this world, I'm never going to hold it back. And it's so funny, man. I told some people the story of you and I meeting. Here I am, the nutrition coach, and this guy that knew who I was, his first time meeting me, I got 2 large pizzas in my hand, in the lobby of a hotel at 1:30 in the morning, and he's probably well, I'm not sure I want to talk to this guy, but fair play. We were in New York City, and it was after a fight, but right. Man, it's dude, it's you know what, man, I think when you love what you do, it's really easy to show up and do it every day. And I'm super humbled, I'm super blessed, and I've been given a talent and a gift for sure, and I know that, and it's man, it'd be super selfish to keep that. So whoever gets value out of this, I genuinely appreciate you. If there's anything I can do for anybody that hears this, man, just reach out. That's John will attest to it. I'm not going to hold back, and I'll give you everything I can. So
yeah, with a couple F-bombs.
Oh, F-bombs are guaranteed. Yeah, if you don't fucking know who I am, then you haven't seen me talk. I think I had to get that approved at Google. I think I had to ask them, because they live stream, when they record, they live stream to all the campuses. So every time I speak, I've spoken there 3 times, always the Chicago campus. And so I was like, can I swear? And they're like, yeah, they're like, people don't care. But I've only had to not do it one time. I spoke at a gym in Vegas, and like when I showed up, they were like, so like we've seen your YouTube stuff, and our crowd is really like Mormon, like can you? And I was like, I got you. So I can do it. Like I can totally censor it, but it's not my favorite. So
Right. Yeah, it's not you.
it's passion, bro. It's passion.
So what I did is I had people send me a bunch of questions. Quiet. I had people send me a bunch of questions, and this is basically kind of like the whole community's problem, I feel like, when it comes to nutrition. And I'm sure you've heard these questions 1,000 times, but I figured that you could probably give us a fresh take on some of this.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, let's do it.
All right, cool. So one of the first ones we have here is, you say that everyone should have an individual approach when it comes to nutrition, but why should everybody be looked at individually instead of just being like, all right, if you're cutting, do this. If you're bulking, do this. Why do you think everybody needs that individual approach?
Well, so first of all, if we want to use cutting and bulking as examples, right? The principles of cutting and the principles of bulking will not change from individual to individual, right? The principles are always going to be the same. It's the application that's going to differ. And so if you're cutting, like hands down, you got to be in a calorie deficit and you need to have enough protein. The end, right? Like I don't care who you are, those are facts. If you're bulking, you need to be in a calorie surplus and need to be resistance training unless you want the weight gain to be fat. Like the end, right? That's non-disputable. Like physiology tells us those are facts. However, if you're cutting and you're in a calorie deficit, clearly your situation as 50-year-old Mrs. Jones, who is a house mom, has a very low stress life, like no kids, you know, goes to CrossFit at 7 a.m. before her husband goes out the door and just chills, like hangs with the ladies during the day, brunches, like does all that, right? Like lifestyle is super chill. Stress is very low, hasn't necessarily tried any diets in the past. Like the way her body is functioning physiologically is completely different than, let's say, a UFC fighter in his 30s who is training 3 times a day, who, let's say it's his first contract, so money's super tight. So he's trying to find a place to live. He's trying to find sponsors. He's training his ass off 3 times a day, wondering, if I lose this fight, do I lose my job? Versus a Fortune 500 CEO who's mid-40s, has drank and partied and done all these things his whole life, who is training with you because he recognizes training with you and dieting with you is the answer, but who's also burning the candle at both ends, right? So the dietary stimulus is only as good as the understanding of the pre-existing life stimulus. And so the fundamental principle remains stress and adaptation, right? That's the fundamental principle of all diet, is stress and adaptation. We as nutritionists and nutrition coaches are intentionally imposing stressors in the form of calorie deficits, calorie surpluses, training stimuli, and those are things that we control. But then we also have to understand like the underlying like stimuli of life stress. How stressful of a lifestyle does this person have? How stressful is this person's job? How much do they sleep? How much just like toxins are they exposed to, right? People in Dubai, people in Abu Dhabi, right? Super amount of just like their environment is very toxic by nature. And so when those things are elevated, clearly like the recovery stimulus or the need for recovery also goes high. And if your body has an abundance of stress and an inability to facilitate adaptation relative to that stress, that's when you stop seeing results. And so all the people that are like, well, you need to eat more to lose weight, like not really, like that's not the correct application of that principle. You need to eat more to get closer to a homeostatic balance so that your body doesn't feel like if it facilitates an adaptive response that it will ultimately die, right? So we are always looking to give our bodies an ability to facilitate an adaptive response. So why does it have to vary from individual to individual? Well, we're all completely different. We all have underlying physiologies, not to mention, and this is just lifestyle, not to mention what brought us to this state. Could you imagine, bro, like you and I, like you're like an iron bull, dude. Like you will, like I could give you the worst diet in the world and say like dog shit will give you results and you will eat dog shit. right? And then there's me, who I'm a former anorexic, right? And so if you come to me and you're like, Jason, you got to gain muscle, and to gain muscle, you got to gain a little bit of body fat, and not knowing that I'm a former anorexic, you're just going to destroy me mentally in the process, right? We're two completely different people. Even though the principles are the same, we both need to be in a small surplus if we want to gain tissue. We both need to resistance train. My application has to be so much different than your application because I'm a different human being. I'm wired differently in my brain. My physiology is different. The hormonal ramifications of what I've done previously in my life are different. So what brought us to today is equally as important as to where we are. And so there's 4 cornerstones everyone needs to look at inside of this. You need to have awareness. What brought you to the dance, right? What brought you to where you are today? There needs to be a level of education. Anyone that undertakes any kind of dietary protocol should be educated as to why they're doing that. There should be desires built in. So like, what do you actually want inside of this process? Because if you fucking hate it, it's not going to serve you. And then the final part is application, right? With what proper knowledge mixed with those first 3 are going to sync up, and what will ultimately allow us to build like the right application.
Wow. That's a lot of heavy information. And you know, it's hard to get that across to people in a small conversation. Like when people come up to you and they're like, hey, you know, I want to drop a few pounds. And then you're like, all right, well, how many hours you got to sit down and figure this thing out?
Yeah.
But I'm glad that, you know, we're starting to begin to understand how important every kind of individual approach is to health when it comes to nutrition, when it comes to training, when it comes to your background, your abilities, your genetics. And I think really that's where fitness is headed in general, because if you just keep on, like, I think I've heard you say this before, there's a wave when you begin doing CrossFit. You know, you get there, you adapt really quick, neurologically, everything is great. And then eventually you just start going harder and harder and harder, and you burn out. And then you don't want to do CrossFit anymore. And like you said, it's not necessarily CrossFit that's the problem. It's how you're applying the principles of CrossFit to your training. And so many coaches have, you know, just beat their athletes into the ground over time that it's given CrossFit a bad name. If you, you know, take the basics of CrossFit, which is just vary your training, have some variable intensity in there, and I think that people will continue to see change, but they have to understand that everything needs to be individualized. So if you have hours and hours of stress when it comes to work, and then you come right after work and you go straight into a hard ass workout, and then you end up laying on the floor that day, if you think you're going to go home and sleep right away, it's not going to happen, you know? And then you get in that cycle of getting a little bit of sleep, working really hard, and thinking, hey, I'm gaining body fat. Maybe because you have a ton of cortisol being produced all the time. And then eventually your cortisol gets screwed up, your sleep gets screwed up, your sex drive gets screwed up. And the whole thing about exercise and training was to get you healthier. And now it's making you sicker.
Yep. That's, I mean, dude, yeah, I mean, you nailed everything. I mean, it's so much misapplication, you know. Again, like the core tenets of nutrition are great. The core tenets of training are great, but anything in like an abundance or like too much, right? In excess, anything in excess is not a good thing. And that's training as well, you know. CrossFit at its core is like, you know, constantly varied, like high intensity functional fitness. But like you said, like the one key that I picked up on is like, you got to vary the intensity. You know, it's not an all out sprint every single day. And one of the big things for me is that one of the, like my claims to fame in the space is I introduced the concept of nutritional periodization, and like nobody had ever heard of that. And you know, in training, we have a pretty set principle, and I think it's pretty well, you know, understood and received, is like every dose of stress requires a dose of recovery. Well, if we look at a prolonged diet, that's a prolonged period of stress. And if that's a dose of stress, we now need a dose of recovery. So if we're actively navigating you away from homeostasis, right? So like I'm drawing the line here, and it's like this way is like fat loss, right? And so like we get you all the way to like where you want to be fat loss. That's a big navigation away from that set point. It's a big navigation away from that homeostatic balance, which in turn is a large stress on the body. So if we're taking you super lean, guess what? We need to actively recover from that. It doesn't mean you have to go back to the body fat you once were. but it definitely means you probably need to gain a little bit of body fat. And at minimum, we need to get your caloric intake probably closer to maintenance calories, and then begin building that metabolic capacity long-term, right? And that's where nutritional periodization can really elongate the career of so many athletes. That's why, you know, all my athletes were always super healthy year in, year out. We actually saw improvement every year. And any athlete that works with me will be the first to tell you, I will pull them out of a competition before I will put them in an extra one. And listen, like when I was at the peak and I was, you know, one of the sought after like go-to guys in CrossFit, that was the biggest knock on me by the athletes, is they didn't want to come to me because they knew I would pull them out of shit if they weren't ready. And they had too big of an ego to let me do that. Now, the people that like drop their ego, I mean, let's be honest, dude. I took some people that shouldn't be where they are and I put them in the top 10 in the world. And like, I was pretty damn proud of that. But you know, it's, there's a science to it, man. It's an art and a science. It's just like anything else. Like, you know, nutrition is definitely an art because you got to mold it to the person. But you got to understand the right science that lives behind it, and it's got to be backed by that. So,
yeah. And you said something a little earlier where you were talking about bringing people back to maintenance. One of the questions that we had from a couple different people was, how do you determine what your maintenance calories are? And how do you figure out your deficit?
So that's a really good question. So in theory, so I'm going to give you theory and then I'm going to give you real life application. In theory, we should be able to figure out your daily energy expenditure very simply, right? If you any calorie, and this is why I'm gonna plug my certification real quick, right? Like I own the Nutritional Coaching Institute. This is why we say application fucking matters. Because if you read any textbook on metabolism or physiology, they're going to tell you unequivocally you can determine a total daily energy expenditure by finding an individual's BMR and multiplying it times an intensity factor, and that's how you get it, right? You use like you know, Mifflin St. John, you use whatever fucking Harris Benedict, like any of the equations, right? And they'll tell you basal metabolic rate, you multiply it times an intensity factor, and that gives you daily energy expenditure. That's maintenance calories relative to who you are and your activity level. And then simply to create a deficit, we typically go 300 to 500 under. I'm a fan of shorter diets, so sometimes I'll get more aggressive with dietary breaks, just depends on who the person is. But that's technical. But here's the problem. This is what everyday nutrition coaches see. We see a middle-aged male or female, you know, late 30s, early 40s, and they come in and they've been trying all the fad diets that have been thrown at them, right? Paleo, keto, fasting, vegan, carnivore, carb cycle, like you fucking name it, right? And all of these like templated diet approaches were built on the fact that they're very low calorie by nature. Because if you tasked me and you said, everybody that ever watches this live, you need to build one diet that works for them, the way I would do that is I would find the worst metabolism and I would build the diet for that person, and everyone else just has to suffer, right? And that's how templated diets work. Now they've tried that. They've destroyed their HPA axis, right? There's some hormonal ramifications. There's some metabolic adaptations that exist. And so if I put you on the theory of, let's just arbitrarily say 2,700 was your total daily energy expenditure, I want a 500 deficit, and that's 2,200 calories, yet you're eating 1,400 and you're not losing. Do you think that me instantly overnight raising you 800 calories, more than a 50% increase overnight, is going to yield weight loss? And the answer is no. Like, there's no way in hell that's going to work. Every now and then you get lucky, but that's probably not going to work very well. And so real life application is understanding that, hey, 2,200 is probably a good deficit, but this person's at 1,400. So you go back, and this is where, as a coach, what I would do is I'd have a conversation with a client. I'd say, listen, you came to me with a goal, and your goal is what I would categorize as an active pursuit of your goal. You want me to take you from today into tomorrow, right? You want me to take you from where you are to losing fat. That's what we would call season. So we call the active pursuit of a goal. However, you've been living there for the last several years of your life by trying whatever fucking asinine diets you fucking tried, right? Clearly they didn't work, but they fucked you up worse than you fucking realized. And so on the tail end of that, what I need you to understand is we're not starting in season, we're starting post-season. And our work together is to first restore homeostatic balance. It's to first get you back to a place where your body will facilitate results. And the exact line I use with everybody is, you yourself have single-handedly lost the right to lose fat. right? By all of your own actions, you have lost the right to lose fat. And I need to restore that right with you. Now, if you're not on board with that, go hire one of those template coaches, because I hear that they'll still try to help you and kill you. Right? That's not me. That's not how I operate. Like, health matters to me.
So how would you go about restoring that?
Yeah, so this is where we get into like reverse dieting, right? Now there's two schools of thought. I don't have an allegiance to either one, so I explain both. There's a reverse diet and a recovery diet. The reverse diet is typified by, like, you start wherever they're at, you raise calories by 10 to 20%, and then you make like super small, like 3 to 5% additions until they're up to theoretical maintenance, right? You know when to stop because biofeedback. So when we talk about biofeedback, we're talking about like hunger, energy, mood, focus, sex drive, things like that. Like when all of those things get back to like normal, then that's when you're like, hey, we're probably at theoretical maintenance. Or there's the recovery diet, which is usually a more aggressive approach of getting you back to theoretical maintenance faster. The problem is both of them work physiologically. There's studies that show, like the Minnesota starvation study that showed reverse diets work. Eric Helms and the guys at 3D Muscle Journey have done a lot of research on recovery diets. They all theoretically show, metabolic adaptation can be reversed, but none of them have taken into account psychology. And what I find inside of the dietary world is psychology matters as much as nutritional application. And so when I'm working with an individual, I need to ask them, like, hey, if you gain 2 pounds next week, are you going to go jump off the bridge? And most of them are like, fuck yeah, I am. Like, yeah, I'm going to lose my shit. Like, I hired you to lose weight. And so a lot of times you end up reverse dieting a lot longer, because if you're less aggressive with your caloric increases, then, you won't gain the weight as quickly. It's usually easier for the person to adhere to for a longer duration, and it works out well. So again, in science, in theory, it's super simple, man. You reverse them or you recover them up to theoretical maintenance, which is a BMR times intensity factor. But in practical application, it's usually much slower. It's usually like a 10 to 15 to 20% increase on the front end. And then it's a lot of tinkering, man, until you can get somebody to trust you and trust the changes that are taking place. And this is where I operate inside of a connection-based model. This is where connection trumps everything, right? They have to trust you. And if you don't have trust from your client, you're fucked. You're never going to create results.
And one of the things that I like about you too is that I've worked with various nutrition coaching services within the gym, and they're always like, yeah, you have a half-hour Zoom call with a person once a month. And it's like, how can you work with somebody and really help them by talking to them once a month or twice a month? I feel like nutrition is almost like an everyday thing where you're kind of like getting feedback from somebody every single day. And really, like, if you want to help somebody, it's going to take a little bit more than a half hour a month. Really connect with these people.
I can tell you, I only work with at most like 12 clients right now. Like, I don't take on very many clients anymore. Mostly for that reason. But when I was at my peak, like before I built my business and scaled my business, I was by myself. Bro, I had 160 clients, and I was on a call with them every week, every 7 days, right? And so, like, I'm talking, I was working 20-hour days. Like, I was training while I was on the phone. There's a video of me somewhere on the internet back squatting 405 for reps while I'm on the phone. And yeah, like, it didn't matter, man. Like, it was all about service, but like, that's not sustainable. And so now, even as I coach businesses, right, as I help people build their businesses, one of the first things we talk about is what happens when it's time to scale. Because first of all, like, scaling, it becomes a very low margin proposition as a nutrition coach. And so scaling isn't always the best. So on the business side, I've built like a knowledge, product, education kind of framework where I take like your knowledge, we productize it, and then we educate based on it. And that usually ends up better for the coach. But yeah, man, like, it's 30 minutes once a month. Like, you're completely full of shit. Like, you're in Miami, dude. Like, Carrie Campbell, she's a WBFF athlete. Like, she lives down there. I mean, dude, usually 6 to 8 weeks out. At that point in prep, I'm looking at pictures and I'm looking at weight every single day. And we're talking every day all the way to the stage. And I know for a fact no other coach does it. But there's so much to learn. There's so much to learn in subtle nuance. And if you're not dotting your I's and crossing your T's as a coach, then like what the fuck are you doing? Like, you know, you can be a good coach, but I'm not interested in good. I'm interested in great. Right. And there's a lot of good coaches out there, but like I've never been interested in being average. I've always wanted to be like, whatever I do, I wanted to be near the best.
Little Mamba mentality, huh?
Yeah, man. Like that's it. Like I'm not going to be at work and I'm not going to have anybody be better than me. So.
Perfect. We were talking before and you said how you would take somebody who, because I see this every single time I work with somebody, they're classically under eating, right? They've gone the whole approach of I'm going to eat less and I'm going to exercise more.
Yeah.
And I've hit a roadblock. I'm gaining fat. I'm losing muscle. And we reverse diet them. And you said that you would bring them to maintenance. So say on the theoretical case we were talking about before, 2,700, that person's eating 1,400. You would slowly bring them all the way back to 27 before you even deficited?
And again, this is where it's going to depend, right? So
Right.
in theory, yes, absolutely. That would be the goal. But then now you got to tell me who this person is. If this person's like former anorexic Jason and at 2000, we're starting to see like visible body fat gain, I might let them cut back to 1,800 for a bit and give them some mental relief. That being said, I've done this enough times that like, I've got 10,000 plus people I've worked with, right, in my career. And it's like, I've done it enough times that like that cut from 2000 to 1,800, it usually doesn't produce any weight loss. So I'll usually like show a client, be like, hey, you want to cut some calories for a week or two? Let's do it. And so that mentally you realize, hey, you're still not fixed. Now again, like, and this is where it gets, application is so important. You know, what if it's a CrossFit athlete? And what if body weight, like relative body strength, is their biggest limiter as an athlete? And it's like, okay, so now it's the chicken or the egg. Do we provide more fuel, or do we go on do we try to maximize relative body strength? You know, and that's a really difficult decision, and that's where you got to dig into biofeedback, and you got to say, okay, what is our perceived hormonal status? How long have we been in HPA axis issues? If they're brand new, I shouldn't say this publicly, but it's the truth, so I'll fucking back whatever I say. Like, if we're brand new in any hormonal issues, I might let you maximize, you know, your relative body strength, and I might let you dig into your hormonal cascade a little bit, because I know that you'll still produce results. But if you're somebody that's lived in adaptation for a very long time, I'm not going to, because I know it's just going to exacerbate long-term recovery, and I'll sacrifice maybe a little worse performance on the front end so that we can recover later and get it there. But yeah, it's so individual, man. Like I wish I had an answer and be like, yes, like there's definitively, this is what I would do, but it would so much be case by case. So in an ideal world, that's what we would do though.
Yeah, exactly. And when you say biofeedback and how you initially start with a client, what's the first thing you look at? Do you ever do any hormone tests? Do you ever have them record their food for a couple days so you can get an idea of where they're actually at?
So we always do a massive call to awareness. So obviously physical data, age, height, weight, all that shit. I absolutely require a food log. A minimum 3 days. I prefer 7. And then I'm asking like dietary history, training history, because again, you know, if you're coming to me and you recently tried keto, and then you tried fasting, and then you tried carnivore, and then you tried vegan, and then you tried carb cycling, like I gotta wonder, is it the diet or is it you, right? Am I the next thing on your list of people to blame?
Shiny object.
Right. Like am I number 6 on like list of failures? And if that's the case, like let's just not work together, because I don't have time for that shit. But if it's like, you're like, no, like I actually gave my full effort to this, and this is where I am, and because of this, because somebody didn't teach me to apply it properly, all right, then you're in, right? So we're having those conversations. I hope this doesn't come out the wrong way. I screen people that work with me as much as they screen me, right? So like to work with me, like I'm going to accept you the same way you were going to choose to pay me. Because if you're just like off the wall and you're not willing to comply, a lot of times like we might be a year before you can even see results if you're a super difficult client. And if you're not willing to go there, and the example I give in our level 1 is I had a female client in her late 50s when she started with me. She's now been with me 7+ years, so she's mid 60s. But similar position, man. It's 800 calories a day, training 4 or 5 times a day. And those workouts were like in home, like body weight. Like, I mean, it's, you know, look at like time, you know, where she's at, like in her life. She's doing like Billy Blank's Taibo and shit. But her thought was like, if she's not moving, she's not burning calories, right? And so I had to get her out of that. Dude, 18 months later, or no, I'm sorry, 20 months later, a year and 8 months, she gained 7 pounds in that time frame. So we never lost weight the first year and 7 months. And mind you, like, I'm not cheap to work with, right? So I'll tell you, she invested a lot of money to gain 7 pounds with me.
Wow.
Right? However, on day one, I told her what was coming. Here we are 7 years later. She only trains 4 times a week. She has dinner out with her husband twice a week, right? There's zero worries. By the way, in our work together, she found out that cancer is very deeply rooted in her history. She's got the BRCA gene. Like, we've been able to keep her healthy as fuck through all of this. And like, if it wasn't for us, like, reestablishing her baseline of health, I don't think she would have recovered from some of the surgeries she had to go through for what she's dealt with. And so again, man, if as a coach, if you don't explain what you believe the long-term vision is, like, you're doing your client a disservice, but you're doing yourself a disservice, because clients come to you with a fundamental thought, right? And it's not their fault, but they come to you with a fundamental thought that you are instantly in the pursuit of achieving goals. And they don't know better. They don't know what we know. They haven't gone through NCI. They haven't gone to nutrition school, right? So they think, well, why the fuck can't I lose fat? And so as a coach, if you're not letting them know what the process is, now you do look like a dickhead. And now they're going to go badmouth you, and rightfully so.
Right.
Because you didn't explain what was going to happen. And so this is why, again, connection is so big. Like, you have to meet your clients where they're at. It matters so much, dude.
Yeah, that's a huge one. Meeting them where they're at, because a lot of times you try to put them on this cookie cutter approach, and if they're not where they're able to accept some of the changes that they need to make, then they're going to fail. And if your mission is to really help people regain their health and prioritize their health, then you can't let them fail. You have to find a way to make them successful and get them
100%.
to understand what they got to do. And
Absolutely.
too many people treat this as a job and not a mission, you know?
I agree with that, man. Especially as it becomes more saturated. And let's be honest, there's good money to be made, right? I coach a lot of 6-figure earning coaches. So there is, there's good money to be made in this space. So you end up seeing like a bunch of people that genuinely don't have the level of care that people like you and I have. Like, we came in for no money in the very beginning, and it was a passion. And so the people that aren't super passionate are now providing poor information, and they haven't invested themselves to learn the real information. I don't think anybody is intentionally hurting people. Like, I maybe I'm naive, but I don't think anybody's doing that. But I just don't think they've really invested themselves in their craft enough to really understand at a high level what it takes to be great at their craft. And I wish more people would do that.
Yeah. I mean, I've been doing this 20 years and I'm still learning stuff every day.
Yeah. And we should. We always should, dude. I have a framework that I teach coaches to use. I call it discover and declare. I think every day, 365 days a year, you should discover something new and you should teach something new, right? And if you learn 365 new things and you teach 365 new things, man, you're going to be in a great place. Like, number one, you're going to be smarter, but number two, you're going to be more respected in your space. And so I teach everybody to do that.
Yeah, that's a great quote. Be the student and be the teacher at the same time.
Always, brother.
All right. So one of the other questions I got was, during quarantine, should we be staying at maintenance calories or should we be in a deficit?
Again, it depends on your goals. So you're quickly going to realize my 2 favorite words are "it depends." It really does, though. There's a massive opportunity that we haven't had in a long time. Life as we know it has not stopped, right? It's never stopped like this. And anybody that has needed to recover needs to be using this time to recover, right? So if you were one of those people that's had a recovery debt that you haven't been able to erase in years, go to maintenance calories, stay there, sleep, rest, and like, stop stressing that the gym is closed, because it's the biggest blessing in disguise for you. if you're somebody that's like really actively pursuing fat loss, and you should actively be pursuing fat loss, like you have the right to be doing so right now, like it's been well structured, it's been well periodized, then stay in your deficit and just understand, right? Like if we took the theoretical calculations of daily energy expenditure is BMR times intensity factor, chances are your daily energy expenditure has changed, right? Because your intensity factor has now changed. So
Sure.
go back, do the new calculation, take your BMR, multiply it times the new intensity factor, and you're like, oh shit, I have less calories. Oh shit, I need to be in a bigger deficit. Okay, cool. Just readjust your calorie intake. So it really depends on who you are, what your goal is, and what you were doing prior to this. But I would argue as a whole, as society, 99% of people should not be decreasing calories. They should be staying right where they're at and allowing some recovery debt to be erased, because the results that you'll be able to facilitate on the tail end of this will be 10x. And I think you're going to see that a lot with people. They're going to be like, why am I experiencing such great results right now? Like they're not going to be able to connect the dots. And this is exactly why, because you finally fucking recovered. Imagine if you did this once a year, right? The results you would experience every year subsequently would be amazing. And this goes into that periodized model, right? Every dose of stress requires a dose of recovery. And this is finally the dose of recovery you've needed for so long.
Yeah. Especially in America. I mean, we're always like, go, 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 hustle, hustle, hustle. Nobody ever talks about sleep, recover, and rest. And when I talk about that with people, they look at me like I got horns coming out of my head. You know, I'm always telling them like, all right, that was a great workout. Now let's breathe for 5 minutes. Let's lay down on the floor. Let's cool down. And some people, you know, like some people will just grab their bags and run out of there. And I'm like, yo, where are you going? Like the workout's not done
This might
yet.
be the most important part of your day.
Right, exactly. And I think that you hit the nail on the head when you said, use this time to recover, because this is like almost like a worldwide healing,
Yeah.
you know, and it's, you have an excuse to sleep more. You have an excuse to eat a little bit more than you're used to eating, and eat a little healthier, and focus on yourself, you know, meditate, you know, read, take some time and just dedicate to yourself, and don't worry about the gym. The gym's not going anywhere. And when you come back, you're going to be an animal. Your nervous system is going to be recovered, and you're going to be full of enthusiasm and motivation to hit it hard, you know? So it's like a lot of people are always like, oh, I can't wait for this, or I can't wait for that. It's like, no, be present, be where you're at, and take advantage of the time that you have. Because once you get there, if you don't take advantage of it now, you're not going to improve, you know?
It's so true, man. I mean, and again, it's just not sexy to say, because what would be sexier for us to sell is like, here's 10 ways that you can lose 10% body fat in quarantine, right? Like that's that marketing, and that's not what I'm about, man. Like I grew my business slower than most people probably would have in my position, but it was always very ethical and it wasn't sexy. And I continue to do that with my businesses. Like I don't play the sleaze game. And I certainly can. I certainly understand marketing at a level that most people don't, but I choose to use it for good instead of bad. And so, yeah, it's not sexy to sell recovery unless you're somebody like us that has experienced the powers of recovery, right? I went into the HPA Access bubble. I know how much better it feels on the other side when you actually start facilitating recovery. You know, I don't talk much about it. Like I was training to be a CrossFit regionals athlete, and I was so overtrained and so under recovered that when I finally that year, like I put everything into it, dude. I mean, I trained twice a day. I slept, like, but I didn't recover enough overall. And the first open workout, I tore my labrum, right? Like my body was clearly so overstressed.
Oh yeah.
I just got a text message. UFC's canceled.
No.
Somebody just texted me that.
Damn, what a bummer, dude. You broke my heart.
Dude, that might be the worst news I've received this whole time.
Yeah. All right. We'll keep on struggling through, and we'll figure it out afterwards.
Wow, that's awful.
I heard you talk about like people stressing about being fat when in actuality they're just like they have low glycogen, they're not eating enough carbs, and they look fat because they have loose skin. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so flat versus fat. So I think I think that a lot of people, so there's a couple of times you see this happen. When you first start a diet, a lot of times you look worse before you look better. And that comes from the notion that, like, typically before you start a diet, you're overfed, your glycogen stores are very full, right? Which is just carbohydrates stored in the cell, but pushing against the skin, right? So you got that tight skin. If you're leaner, you got like more vascularity. But as soon as you do that, right, like you drop the carbohydrate intake, all of a sudden carbs and the subsequent water exit the muscle, because every gram of carbs takes 2.7 grams of water to transport. So now you've got carbs and water exiting the muscle. So it's like a balloon, right? Like when the contents of the balloon are very flat, like the surface is just kind of like, like it's not real tight. It doesn't look real good. Then you put contents inside the balloon, sand, air, water, whatever. That surface is really, really thin. It's taut. It looks really good. It's the same concept with glycogen in the cells. So we see that at the beginning of a diet, or we see that at like the very tail end where you're very glycogen depleted. And it's not only aesthetic athletes that I use this with, right? We're looking at like a UFC fighter, and we're getting close to like weight cut, but I know you've got some hard training sessions left, and I'm looking at you and you look super flat. I know that you don't have the fuel inside of you available to push the glycolytic activity needed in these training sessions. And so I'm going to feed you even at the risk of weight coming up a little bit, because I can manipulate that on the back end. But yeah, it's not actual fat, it's flat, right? It is just less glycogen in the cell, not pushing against the skin. It's talked a lot about in the physique space, but it definitely has application to no matter who you're working with. You can always infer something that's going on with it.
Yeah. We already talked about, this is a question somebody asked me, why can't you just eat 1,000 calories a day and burn 2,000 calories to continue to get lean? Can you talk about how the metabolism reacts to that?
Yeah, so it doesn't necessarily react, it adapts, right? And so it becomes very efficient. And so as we just take in 1,000 calories, your body will initially burn whatever, right? But at some point it recognizes this is all I'm going to get, right? And it recognizes that if I continue to burn at this rate, at some point, like your body just factors it out forever. And so it's like, well, if I continue to burn at this rate, I'm literally going to have nothing, right? And as human beings, we were meant to survive, thrive, and procreate. We were not meant to be super shredded. And so your body quickly recognizes it's like, shit, I cannot go to nothing. I cannot go to famine. And so what does it do? It naturally slows down its output, right? It slows down and it regulates. It becomes very efficient with the little amount of fuel you're giving. And so if it knows it's only going to get 1,000 calories, it can only expend those calories at a much slower rate, right? So you start to see hormonal decreases, you start to see thyroid decreases. Ultimately, it's all coming from the HPA axis, right? But you're basically starting to see HPA axis dysfunction, which leads to what we see common day as metabolic adaptation. And once you become adapted, 1,000 calories effectively becomes your new maintenance. So then if you want to lose weight, you're talking like 300 to 500 calories. And with a non-functioning thyroid, but also even worse, like 1,200 calories is a surplus. So you really want to gain weight on 1,200 calories? Like not so much. Now that being said, there's some dieters that they cannot, for the life of them, stick to a diet for like 8, 10, 12 weeks. They just can't. Whatever their like emotional attachments to food are way stronger than their inability to facilitate. So if you think about that, like everyone's got a different rate of adaptation, right? Or adaptive response inside of their metabolism. So if you've got a hyper adapter, somebody that adapts very quickly, you could put them in like 1,000 calories for like 2 to 3 days and then bring them back up for a few days. And then, take them. And sometimes that's a very aggressive way to get weight off people. And it speeds up the process, and they're like, they see shit like in the mirror, they see the scale go down, and it keeps them inside of it. So again, this goes back to the individuality of prescription, is understanding like what are the mental triggers that my client will have during this process.
Wow. Yeah. I never had heard of that one, but that makes a lot of sense. I guess because
there's one called it's PSMDF. It's like protein sparing modified dietary fasting. And a lot of people will do that, right? Super low calorie, adequate protein, 3-4 days at a time, bring you back up to maintenance for like a day or two. To be totally honest, man, it's my favorite way to diet.
Really?
I like to be, yeah, because I fucking hate living on a diet, man. Like I very much like living just south of maintenance. I like a little bit of hunger in my life, but I like a lot of freedom. I also am 35 years old now, and I just don't give a fuck like I did when I was 25. So I walk around, I have abs year round, I'm never out of shape, and I'm good with that. Like, I don't need to be any better.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to be like that. When you talked about protein sparing, one of the questions was, why do you see a low carb diet or a low fat diet, but you don't really see a low protein diet?
So one of the things that you always want in any dietary setting is you always want to preserve the lean tissue, right? And protein is what's going to preserve that lean tissue. And so for every pound of lean tissue you have, your metabolic rate is exponentially higher. And so over the course, I guess I'll go at it two ways. Like, over the course of a diet, if you actually want to look better, you're going to have more protein. Also consider the fact that protein has a higher thermic effect, lower insulin function than a carbohydrate. So there's a host of reasons there. But that being said, if you came to me and you were like, yo, dude, I just want to lose weight, I don't give a fuck about my body composition, like, honestly, it'd be a calorie goal, and I'd be like, stay underneath it. Because they've proven via the Twinkie diet and the McDonald's diet, you absolutely can lose weight while eating nothing but Twinkies or nothing but McDonald's. If I had to guess, if you looked at the body comp after those, they probably lost lean tissue and gained body fat. So in effect, what you're saying to me is, I want to lose weight, but I want to get fatter. If that's you, like, more power to you, I guess. Not sure I'd take you on as a client, but that would be how you would do it.
And how do you go about talking to, like, clients who come to you and they're under eating protein? Well, this is a two-part question. How do you figure out how much protein they need to be eating? And what if there's somebody that's like a vegetarian or a vegan? Because it seems to be very popular these days for people to go vegan or go vegetarian and then see their bodies totally change the way they didn't want them to. How do you go about handling that?
So first and foremost, reference range that we provide in NCI is 0.7 to 1.2 grams per pound of body weight. Unless you're obese, then we use 0.7 to 1.2 grams per pound of target body weight or lean body mass, if you know it. So that's pretty standard prescription. For vegans, I'll try to get them up to a 0.7. I've never had a client that I can't do it with. And again, it goes back to education. We say education drives compliance. I'm going to educate you like crazy on the front end, and I'm going to teach you that if you don't have lean tissue, your metabolism is not going to be anywhere near optimal, and that's not acceptable with me. So we're always just working towards that.
Yeah, that's great. I run into that a lot with people, and I'm just like, look, you know.
Oh, it's so popular right now.
Yeah, I have them do a food log, and I'll look at it, and it'll be 40% carbs, 40% fat, and then luckily, if they're lucky, 15 to 20% protein.
Yeah,
and I'll be like,
it's very common.
Yeah, there's no way that you're going to be able to keep your lean muscle tissue, improve your performance, and drop body fat with, you know, the way that you're eating. So I think that a good rule of thumb that I'll use going forward will be that 0.7, because that's something that they can hit.
0.7 is a minimum. Yeah, and that's something they can work to. And they don't have to get there overnight, but it's a target for us to work them up to.
Yeah, that's great. All right, let's see. How about this one? Is fruit okay?
Yeah. Why wouldn't it be?
Well, I guess
because it's stored in the
about, like,
liver, and it's gonna make you fat. Like, that's what people say. Like, it's stored in the liver glycogen. Now, fair play. It is stored in the liver, and it's not stored in the muscle, right? So it is stored in the liver as glycogen. But at some point, you're gonna use those calories, right? Unless you're like a fruit, like Chastity Snowden used to work for me, and she used to be a self-proclaimed fruitarian. Like, unless you're like a fruitarian and like that's all you're eating, but at that point, it comes down to just eating in a surplus of calories.
Right.
So I have never, like, let's be honest. We've had a lot of fat people come to us. Not one person in the last 15 years has come to me and said, Jason, I got fat because I eat too much fruit.
Yeah.
And it's like really, like, I promise you, that's not your biggest hiccup. Like, it might be the pizza and beer on Friday night, but it was not the fruit during the day. That
brings me to my next question. How do you feel about alcohol? Because I feel like so many people are trying to rationalize alcohol use. Like, wine is healthy. I can have a beer once, you know, a couple beers on the weekend, stuff like that. I feel when I work with people, I tell them, look, just cut out the alcohol for 30 days. You know, just stop drinking, you know? And when they really do it, they see great results. But if they keep drinking, they don't necessarily, even if they're eating better, they don't necessarily see the results. How do you feel about alcohol?
Let me pause you on that for 1 second and grab a charger so I don't lose you, and then I'll give you that answer, because that's twofold.
What's up, everybody? Thanks for tuning in. We're almost done. We got 5 more minutes. If you have any questions, go ahead and drop them on the comments, and I'll try to get them answered for you.
I'm happy to answer any questions I can.
All right.
All right, sorry about that, guys. But yes, so first and foremost, scientifically speaking, with alcohol, so first of all, alcohol is 7 calories per gram, right? We know proteins and carbs have 4 calories per gram, fats have 9 calories per gram, alcohol is 7. Your body doesn't necessarily understand 7, right? It's very much a toxin. It prioritizes alcohol metabolism above everything else. So it comes in, your body's like, what the fuck is this? Get it the fuck out. And so like everything else at that time is not being metabolized. So it's what I say is it changes the priority of metabolism, first and foremost. That has to be understood. Second, the overall metabolic rate is slowed for, I've seen varying things. I've seen up to 6 to 8 hours per drink that you consume. I've seen 24 to 48 hours. The research varies, but it definitely does impair overall metabolic rate. It also impairs hormonal function. Like, we know these things. And so there's a lot of things you have to understand about alcohol in general. So if hormonal function is impaired, if overall metabolic rate is impaired, and it's prioritizing alcohol metabolism, like, we know none of those things are good, right? Empirically, what I can tell you is it's the frequency of alcohol that determines everything, not the overall quantity, right? So ironically, like 1 to 2 glasses of wine 3 times per week is considered casual, right? I would rather you drink 3 fucking bottles on one night and not do it the rest of the week. Because, and I'm just saying empirically, there's no science, no data to back this up before anybody comes and attacks me and they're like, Jason's saying some shit that's like not backed. No, it's not backed by science. But I've got 10,000 plus case studies. And I can tell you that, like, you will recover from that faster than you will continuing to do it. I'd rather take that one hit, that one impairment. But like you said, man, my big thing, first of all, if you're an athlete and you're working with me, like, why the hell are you drinking? You're not that serious. But for Gen Pop, for people that just want to create change, yeah, like I typically try to remove it for 30 days and then we reinsert it. The beauty is you see 30 days of results. When you start reinserting it and you see how it skews the results, most of the time people are like, you know what? I was just fine without it. So I'll stay without it. Some people have a crazy attachment to it. Sometimes you got to deal with it. So it's, but yeah, empirically speaking, it's the frequency. It's not the overall quantity. Yeah. And most people are really surprised to learn that.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell my wife and make sure that she just has it one night.
One night per week, a couple bottles.
Hit it hard.
Yeah, get it all in.
Yeah. Well, thanks, man. I really appreciate your time. My video ended, and I learned a lot. I'm sure that the community learned a lot. And could you just tell us where we can find you? Because I'm sure some people are going to want to, look a little bit deeper into the services you offer and the educational system that you offer.
Yeah. So me personally, if you have questions, it's just at Jason Phillips is Nutrition on Instagram. But the company is called the Nutritional Coaching Institute. It's www.ncicertifications.com or at Nutritional Coaching Institute on Instagram. And yeah, I mean, right now in the midst of all this, I know it's a skill that people want to learn. We are offering discounts for anybody that wants to take that on, because we believe we're building the next people that will live on the front line. So that's kind of our way of giving back to the community. I think we're at 75% off right now for almost everything. Yeah. So anybody that wants to come through the cert, man, we're looking to build an army of support. That's really what we're after. So would love to help people out. And yeah, I mean, dude, it's always, I could sit here and chat all night, and this is obviously, it's my passion, it's my jam. And but yeah, I mean, anybody that gets value out of this, I'm super humbled. So I appreciate the time. Cool, man. I guess now we got to do our UFC research. Dude, what the fuck? That is literally the worst news I've ever heard. I quickly texted my buddy back, and he said Dana said it was taken out of his hands. Yeah, I bet. That's the only way he would stop it. I'm really intrigued now that he bought the island, though. How quickly did the island fight start? Because I don't think they could take it out of his hands there. Nope, he's not gonna fucking stand for that. Yeah, Biggie texted me. Called me too. He texted you. Yeah, no, he called me, and I was just like, all right, it's legit. Yeah. Fuck, man. I hope it's only like a week or two delay. That's such a bummer.
I really wanted to see Tony and Justin throw down. You know, of course, I want to see Biggie fucking fight, but I really wanted to see.
I was looking forward to all the fights, man. Like Calvin Kattar, Jeremy Stevens, like even like Sam Alvey fighting. Like, oh, dude, it was such a good card. I saw like Rose pulled out yesterday, but they were gonna get a replacement for Andrade. Like, it was gonna be a great card. But Dana will fix it. Like, again, he's still entrepreneur of the year, man. He's got it.
Now,
doing the damn thing. So
the only person that could stop him was the government. You know, they were probably like, "Look, you can't be throwing this shit in our face. We're gonna stop this. You know, we have to. Somebody's
actually making money in all this, so we can't allow that to happen.
No, God forbid.
Yeah, God forbid anyone other than the government makes money. Like, we're all fucked.
For sure, 100%.
So yeah, it's crazy, dude. It's crazy. Well, man, dude, I genuinely appreciate you, brother. Anything I can ever do for you and all this craziness is done, I'll come down and, you know, whatever, bring knowledge to the gym or whatever. Like, whatever I can do for you, always down to do it.
100%, man. And same here. I mean, I'm going to continue to try to bring you on here and there, you know, so people can really learn because, you know.
Well, dude, any of your staff that wants to go through it, like, let me know. I mean, I'll always do the 75% off deal for you guys and whatever. Like, any of your staff that wants to come through our stuff, that wants to learn it, we're always happy to do it.
I was already plotting.
Yeah, let me know, dude. I got you covered. Just let me know.
Thanks, Jay. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Always, brother. Always, dude. You guys have a great night, man. I'm going to go pick up dinner now. So.
All right. Stay healthy.
I appreciate it, brother. You guys do the same, man. Be good.
All right, man. Thank you.
Later, bud.